First, let's start with this case. I am a 42-year-old father with 2 children from 2 different marriages. My son, Jack, who is 22 years old, and my daughter, Cassie, who is 7 years old. Jack was born during my first marriage to my late wife, Penelope, who tragically passed away when Jack was 9 years old. Her loss deeply affected both of us. I believed Penelope and I would spend our lives together, and it took me years to feel ready to date again. When I did, Jack was 14 years old, and he wasn't happy about it. I eventually met Sarah, my current wife, through work. We dated for several months before an unexpected pregnancy accelerated our relationship. Sarah moved in with Jack and me by the time she was 4 months pregnant. Jack was understandably upset by these sudden changes, but both Sarah and I wanted our child to grow up in a household with 2 parents. To accommodate our growing family, we also had to move out of the apartment I had shared with my late wife, which added to Jack's frustrations. To support him during this time, I enrolled him in therapy to help him adjust to the changes. Sarah made a significant effort to honor Penelope's memory. She understood the pain of losing a parent because her own stepmother had erased nearly all traces of her late mother. Sarah ensured that we kept meaningful mementos of Penelope around the house, which helped preserve Jack's connection to his mom. After Cassie was born, Jack wanted little to do with her. While this was understandable given the circumstances, it was still upsetting for me. In contrast, Cassie's maternal cousin, Will was 18 years old, quickly bonded with her. From the start, Will took on a brotherly role in Cassie's life, spending time with her, playing with her toys, and even sharing meaningful tokens with her. For instance, they both have matching necklaces inspired by her favorite character, which Will treats as a lucky charm for his sports games. Jack and Will left for college this year, marking a significant change in our household. Jack's academic performance in high school had been mediocre, and he struggled with poor grades. Without scholarships, he began his higher education at a community college before transferring to a reputable university this year. On the other hand, Will excelled academically and athletically, earning an almost full scholarship to a distant college. This Thanksgiving, both Jack and Will were able to return home. Jack arrived first, and while Cassie greeted him warmly, her reaction was subdued compared to her response to Will's arrival. Cassie had waited for Will at my sister-in-law's house, made a large, glittery welcome sign, and cried tears of joy upon seeing him. My sister-in-law captured their reunion on video and posted it on social media. Jack saw the video and became upset, feeling hurt by the apparent difference in Cassie's enthusiasm. After hearing his complaints repeatedly, I eventually lost my temper and told him that this situation was a direct result of his own actions. For the past 7 years, he had made no effort to bond with his sister, and her reaction reflected that reality. Jack became angry and stormed off to his room. Since the incident, my late wife's parents have been calling me relentlessly, insisting that I reprimand Cassie for not being as excited about Jack's return. Cassie, unaware of the details, has picked up on her brother's upset demeanor, and it has started to affect her emotionally. Meanwhile, Will is angry with Jack for making Cassie feel bad. Now I find myself in a difficult position, unsure of how to navigate this family conflict while protecting my children's emotional well-being. Let's start judging. You're correct about why Cassie prefers Will, but you're in the wrong for how you are communicating with your son Jack. He's your kid too, and it doesn't sound like you treat him very well. The way you frame the scenario sure makes it seem that you don't hold your own son in very high esteem. You are very quick to list all of Will's great characteristics and really critical of your son's perceived shortcomings. You sound like you would rather have Will for a son. You talk about Jack like he's a disappointment to you and talk up Will. Maybe your son picks up on that. Like all of us, your son is not too old for teachable moments. This was definitely one of them. Before Jack even said anything the first time, you should have taken him aside and, as gently as you could, pointed to her, no doubt adorable, response to seeing her cousin. You could have then pointed out that love is a plant that needs nurturing and not something that a person is entitled to because they share DNA. After that, if you think he understood, you could point out to him that she's 7 and it's absolutely not too late to start being a great big brother. He just has to want to be. You're in the wrong for making me read that love letter to Will. Just adopt him, since you are clearly more into having him as a kid than your own son." In a matter of months, it went from just you and Jack to suddenly moving away, having a new mom, and a little sister on the way. But kudos to you. You threw him in therapy. You did the bare minimum of having someone else deal with your child's feelings of his life being flipped completely inside out. It's such a wonder that his grades weren't amazing. I'm honestly at a loss as to how he wasn't the perfect grade A student like your darling Will. Next up, about a week ago, I suggested to my brother that I host Christmas lunch at my place and have him and his wife join me. He liked the idea of spending Christmas together, but expressed that he didn't want to deal with the heavy holiday traffic to get to my side of the city. Instead, he proposed that we celebrate on another day. I was fine with that and suggested we could choose a location that's halfway between us if we weren't going to meet on Christmas Day itself. Fast forward to today. He called me after discussing with his wife and offered to host Christmas lunch at their place instead. My immediate reaction was to ask whether this wouldn't bring back the same issue of dealing with holiday traffic, which was the reason he didn't want to come to my house in the first place. His tone quickly became defensive, and he suggested that we simply do our own separate things for the holidays instead. For some background, my brother frequently drives long distances, while I rarely do. On top of that, I have health issues that make extended trips much more difficult for me to manage. Last year, he had actually suggested that I host Christmas at my place. At the time, I just moved into my new home, so hosting wasn't feasible. But now that I'm more settled, I thought it would be a good opportunity to host this year. It's also worth noting that my brother regularly makes trips of similar lengths, around 3 hours every couple of weeks. So, am I wrong for not wanting to drive 3 hours each way for Christmas lunch, especially considering he was the one who didn't want to deal with traffic in the first place? Let's start judging. You're not in the wrong. Relationships are about compromise. Are there any other extenuating circumstances? Like, are they caretakers for small children, elderly or pets that can't be left alone for a half day? Is there any mass transit available to help? You make it sound like you live on opposite sides of a city. That must be a big metro area, so wondering if there are any trains, etc., that can make commuting easier? Good luck. If not, just meet over FaceTime or Zoom, I guess. You're not in the wrong. Your initial response was valid, and he probably got mad because when he asked his wife, she asked why they couldn't come here instead. His brain probably shut off and didn't compute the explanation he gave would be responded back to him. He is mad because he realized at that moment him asking that of you was stupid and should have never been asked. Basically, the light bulb came on and he realized he is an idiot. You're both maybe sort of not completely hearing each other out and being reactive, but maybe your brother is more reactive. Maybe your brother's wife reminded him that they only get Christmas off from work and making even an hour-and-a-half trip any other day would not be possible. Have they driven the 3 hours in the past to see you? Do you ever go see them? How bad is your health issue? Is it completely inhibitive and they're not being sensitive to it, or is it manageable? Do they have kids they would have to travel with? Do you think they might have a reason for it to feel like they put more work into seeing you than you put in to see them, or the other way around? These are all things you should discuss and be open to hear from one another, and both be ready to compromise. Admittedly, your brother's reaction of just throwing his hands up and suggesting you just cancel seeing each other seems a bit dramatic, like he might be hard to compromise with. But I'd suggest to try and speak again and ask questions about what are challenges in seeing one another and trying to come to a compromise that works for both of you. Next up, I am a 23-year-old living in an apartment with 3 roommates, Sarah, 22, Jenny, 24, and Lucy, 20. Our apartment complex has been dealing with a frustrating parking situation due to construction. Previously, we had access to 2 parking garages, the larger main deck and a smaller secondary deck. However, the main deck is currently under construction, leaving us with only the smaller deck or an alternate parking lot 2 blocks away, which is inconvenient. When we moved in, all of us paid for parking spots. I specifically paid extra for the last spot in our section, so I wouldn't have to call anyone to move their car when I got home. Since the main deck closed, parking has become tricky. Our apartment is allotted 4 spots, but the arrangement requires the first 2 spots to pull forward, while the second 2 spots park behind them. This setup means the front 2 cars can get blocked in by the back 2 cars. Initially, we worked out a system. Sarah and Lucy parked in the front 2 spots, and Jenny and I parked behind them since we typically left the earliest and came home the latest. This system worked fine for a few weeks. Then Lucy started parking in my designated spot instead of pulling forward to her spot. This caused a lot of issues for me. After long days of work or school, I often had to call Lucy to come down and move her car. Or worse, park in the lot 2 blocks away and walk home. This happened repeatedly. I confronted Lucy multiple times about this, and every time she would give excuses like she was tired, busy, or needed to leave later. I explained my situation to her. I work 2 jobs, one of which keeps me out very late, and I need the convenience of parking at the apartment. She always apologized and promised to fix the issue, but never did. The final straw came when Lucy went home for Thanksgiving and left her car parked in my spot for over a week. Frustrated, I decided to speak with our apartment complex manager. The manager was understanding and mentioned that Lucy had already received complaints from others in the building. She assured me she would handle the situation. The complex manager towed Lucy's car and revoked her parking pass entirely. Apparently, Lucy hadn't been following the parking rules, using her designated spot, and had also been parking in handicapped spaces and guest spots without a pass. Additionally, she hadn't paid for parking that month. When Lucy returned, she was furious with me for reporting her. She accused me of intentionally trying to ruin her life and claimed I was trying to get her evicted or kicked out of college. She screamed at me and called me a terrible person. I apologized and explained that I didn't know they would tow her car, but she didn't care. She has since been telling everyone how awful I am. Jenny and Sarah both agree that I was in the right to report her, as do a few of our other friends. However, Lucy and a handful of others believe I went too far and think I'm a major jerk for this. Am I wrong for reporting my roommate and ultimately getting her car towed? Let's start judging. So wait, Lucy would come home, see 2 empty parking spots oriented nose to tail, drive into the first one, and just stop, leaving an inaccessible parking spot in front of her? You're not in the wrong. This is absurd. It doesn't matter how tired Lucy is. It takes exactly the same effort to stop in the first spot versus stop in the second spot. You're not in the wrong. Lucy has shown 0 regard for you, especially by leaving her car parked in your spot for 10 days. That's ridiculous. Frankly, if I left my car for 10 days, I would 100% have left my keys with my roommates. Personally, I would harden up and get Jenny and Sarah to agree. Lucy needs to leave a spare set of keys in the apartment anytime she doesn't park in her own spot, at minimum. You're not in the wrong. The apartment manager had already received numerous complaints about Lucy's parking. You had also talked to her multiple times, but she never rectified her mistakes. She is now in the find out phase of mess around and find out. But I'm trying to figure out how her parking could affect her standing at uni. Next up, I am a 37-year-old man who has always been close to my 35-year-old sister. We talk regularly, and during one recent conversation, she confided in me that she's been feeling very depressed and overwhelmed lately. I could tell she was holding back tears, and I wanted to do something nice to cheer her up. To brighten her day, I contacted a local florist and arranged for flowers to be delivered to her workplace. I included a note that simply read, "Thinking of you." A few hours later, I received a call from the florist. They informed me that a man had been calling them non-stop, demanding to know who sent his wife flowers. The man, my brother-in-law, was aggressive and threatening over the phone. The florist, who explained that it was against their policy to reveal the sender's identity, reached out to me for permission to disclose my name. The reason for the confusion was that my sister, assuming the flowers were from her husband, had called to thank him. When he denied sending them, he immediately accused her of having an affair. His reaction escalated to him calling the florist repeatedly, demanding answers. This misunderstanding has led to a major blow-up between my sister and her husband. My sister is now more upset than ever and has been fighting with her husband since the incident. While my intention was to do something kind for her, it inadvertently caused more stress in her life. Some of my friends believe that I should have included my name on the card to avoid this situation. They argue that had I done so, the entire misunderstanding could have been prevented. However, I feel that the blame lies with my brother-in-law, as his inability to control his temper and his immediate assumption of infidelity were what caused this mess. Am I wrong for not including my name on the card? Or is my brother-in-law the one at fault for his overreaction? Let's start judging. Even if husband gently kindly said it wasn't him, where does that leave her? Calling everyone she knows, not knowing who sent them. Begging the florist to tell her so she can say thank you. Eventually calling you to vent about how she got these flowers and she doesn't know from whom, so that you can be like, "Surprise, I am the best." Maybe she would feel like it was a stalker/someone with a crush on her, and feel really uncomfortable. I'm assuming you know your brother-in-law, and this isn't 100% out of character. But even if he isn't usually prone to rage, most people would at least feel comfortable, somewhat suspicious. Everyone sucks. It's obvious why brother-in-law is an idiot, so I won't even get into that. As others have said, you should have known this could cause strife in your sister's marriage, even if you didn't know the degree to which your brother-in-law would pop off. However, I want to point out how you set your sister up. She has been depressed lately and got flowers with a sweet note, "Thinking of you." She was probably excited to have received such a sweet gesture from who she thought was her husband. Can you imagine how gutted she must have felt when he told her they weren't from him? And now she's gone from happy, excited, to have gotten flowers to being yelled at and accused of cheating from her idiot husband. You probably meant well, but honestly should have known better. Nah, but you set your sister up, and she's probably more depressed now than she was before you did anything. That's also a creepy note to include anonymously. Everyone sucks. You are being willfully ignorant if you think that the assumption wouldn't have been her partner. For her and for everyone in her office. There were definitely people saying to her, "Oh, your husband is so sweet," etc. If she knew, she could have just said, "Yeah, he is, but these are actually from my loving brother." But she's stuck thinking, "I have no idea who sent these to me." Of course, her husband is going to be caught off guard by it. And as random flowers are often considered romantic, upset. And she is going to have no response. Husband is the idiot for raging at the florist.